Hi guys, it's Sophie and I'm doing another Man Booker review today, and I'm going to be talking about Everything Under by Daisy Johnson. I feel like Everything Under is one of the books that's been most talked about for the Man Booker Prize, and I think that's mostly because of the cover. I think it's such a beautiful book that lots of people have picked up, have been interested in it. It also did the rounds on, or rather the author did the rounds on BookTube before this one came out because of the short story collection Fen, which quite a lot of people enjoyed. So I feel as though quite a lot of people will have heard about this one and potentially might be interested in picking it up. So yes, I thought I'd just kind of chat through a little bit about the story first and then again move into my thoughts. So Everything Under is a book about a young girl and her mother, kind of at its heart. There's other storylines woven in, who lived quite an alternative lifestyle. They lived in a canal boat and kind of drifted around the UK up and down these rivers, although they stayed in one place for quite a long period of time. And they lived very separately from society. They didn't necessarily kind of work in a normal way, or if they did, it was quite short-lived and fluid, I suppose, if the mum did. When the little girl is in her early teens, her mother disappears. She leaves to go one day and never comes home. So she has sort of been left really not knowing where her mother is or what's happened, and gets on with her life. So this story follows a number of different timelines, and they're all called different sections. So there's one called The Cottage, which is a storyline in which the mother is with the daughter. There's one called The Hunt, in which the daughter's looking for her mother. There's one called The River, where they're still sort of on the river as young children. There's one called Sarah, which is broadly kind of the mother's story. And I think they're the only ones there are. Yeah, so the chapter headings are all just the titles of each section. But I didn't pick that up for ages, and I found it really confusing when I started, because I was trying to kind of piece together who everyone was and who they related to one another, because names also change and are quite fluid throughout as well, and you aren't quite sure what everyone's called at the beginning. So we're kind of following this story through lots of different snapshots in time, which works to an extent. As I say, I found it a bit confusing to begin with, but maybe if I'd picked up on the chapter headings a little bit sooner, I might not have. Once I got them, it was easier. I just flipped back through the chapters and kind of reacquainted myself with where I was and carried on. There is kind of that question about whether or not that aids the story or not. Would we care more or less if it was just told linearly? I don't know. I think I would have preferred it in a linear fashion, but I get why it wasn't, because in a weird way the kind of reveal is actually very early on into the person's life. She just doesn't know it yet, but potentially we could have gone for one with a current day and then one looking back at that particular character who is actually separate from the mother and the daughter. The twist, which obviously I won't kind of chat about in this, also I had to kind of go back and make sure I was right in what I thought had happened, because of the fact that it's almost like a ball of wool. Like, all the stories are woven into one another, and you kind of think you know what the end is, but it might not quite be there. You might have to go through and fiddle around a little bit. So when I got to the twist, I then flipped back through all of the chapters to make sure I got it right. So that was a little bit laborious. I don't know if that was just me not quite grabbing it or whether that's a theme, but I did find that. Once I kind of got it, I quite enjoyed it. That's kind of the plot overall, is this finding someone who's been lost to you, and also finding about who they are and their kind of secret lives within there. The story does a lot of different things as well around things like, one of the kind of major themes is about Alzheimer's and what that does to the brain. There's quite a lot of reference to people who are transgender or gender fluid. It's not 100% sure with one of the characters, the other one is definitely transgender. So you've got these things mixed in as well, alongside the kind of underlife in the UK, where it's not happening at a level that society's aware of, but there's this like rich life beneath, which is kind of the Everything Under, is where I imagine that comes from. The writing style is absolutely beautiful. I really liked the writing, and to begin with I started to underline things, but found quite quickly that I could have just kept going, and that none of the writing well, there were bits of the writing that were gorgeous and really nice little turns of phrase, but there weren't bits where it really stood out to me. It just kind of felt as though she's a very lyrical writer overall. I'll just read one for an example. Okay, this is just one sentence, but it says, "The rental car was red and the hospital seemed to be mostly a long corridor." Or this little section, which I'll read, is just a paragraph which says, "The house is different with you here. The scattered cups and periodic emptying of the fridge in the middle of the night. The way you think burrowing into my mind so that I find myself losing days, forgetting the ordering of weeks. The fights I try to avoid but which swim up out of you, last whole nights and end with you weeping in the bath." So the writing I thought was really lovely, and it was quite an enjoyable world to be in because I think of how lyrical and beautiful the writing was. It's very grotty, it kind of does feel quite dark, dirty, and there is a myth in here, and I don't know the myth, I haven't heard of the myth, but there is a myth through here, and there are kind of elements of that. There's prophets and monsters and hidden things and strange threats running alongside the characters, and I wonder maybe if I would have thought it was a bit more clever if I knew what the myth was, but I don't, but I just know it is a myth. And even when I was talking to Tom about it, he said, "Oh, that sounds very Greek." Just kind of in hearing it, it does feel quite like it's being told on a myth. Excuse me, my cat is just getting into that bag behind me. I'm going to move the cat because she's having a good time, but I can't really talk. Ooh. Yeah, I'm just going to lift her up and out. I think summarising my thoughts on this book, it feels like something I enjoyed, but I'm not still quite there, if that makes sense. I liked it as a book, I would potentially recommend it to other people, but it reads like a lot of those books that I think quite a few people on BookTube enjoy, of that British countryside, dark, dirty, mythical retellings that hit a lot of other people's tick boxes and don't quite hit mine. I don't know, I think I probably would recommend reading it. I expect this one's had really mixed reviews because I expect there's people who think it's confusing and potentially unbelievable and just sort of a bit done, and I expect there's people who absolutely love it for the lyrical writing, for the kind of storytelling arcs, and for the fact it's a retelling done quite well. I think, I haven't read the myth, but it feels as though it doesn't feel completely out of place in the story here. So I think in general, if you enjoy those books which this might remind you of, you're going to like Everything Under, and if you're not sure on them, you probably aren't. I think this might be shortlisted, actually. I think it's definitely got merit as a book to be shortlisted, but it isn't my favourite. But even if it won, I would kind of get it because I feel like it could be other people's cup of tea. Yeah, so that's my review of Everything Under. I think I gave it 3 stars in the end, which kind of fits with the general mood of this video, that it's in the middle of the road to me. But hopefully you guys will like it. I feel like people really might like it who aren't me. Yes, so I will chat to you guys soon in my next video. This one is, I think my 7th or 8th Man Booker read now, so I'm really powering through. I'm doing really well this year. Normally I don't do quite as well in the early stages as I've done this year, so fingers crossed I can keep it up and read all of them before the shortlist. That's my aim. Yeah, I will chat to you guys soon in my next video, and look after yourselves until then. Bye!